In this video, I'm going to figure out which one of these two Pokemon is the king of the sea. It's this one, because its name is literally Seaking, a portmanteau of the words sea and king. So now that you've got what you came here for, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and ring the chime echo. And if you have made it this far, you are incredible. I will see you in my next video. Sometimes I wish things were that simple, but of course they aren't. I spent 38 attempts trying to get good results with these two Pokemon to hopefully have accurate data that then I could share with you so that we could actually determine which one is better for a Pokemon Yellow solo challenge. These are the rules for the playthroughs, so check them out in the description if you're unfamiliar with my content. Okay, so let's get into my first playthroughs, and while we do the initial stages of the game, we're going to compare and contrast these two Pokemon in Generation 1. I started my playthroughs with Seadra because I figured that it had a slight advantage here since its special stat is higher than Seaking's. In Generation 1, the special stat is used as a combined offensive and defensive stat, and spoiler alert, both Seaking and Seadra are going to be relying on a lot of special moves throughout these runs. When I received my Seadra from Professor Oak, I nicknamed it Rapidash. After all, it does evolve from Horsey. For base stats, it has 55 HP, 65 attack, 95 defense, and special, and 85 speed, giving it a 16.41% chance to crit in Generation 1. It's got a medium fast growth rate, they both do, which is just middle of the road for solo challenges. It's a mono water type, and as such, it gets the standard water type coverage on its moveset. Through TM and HM, it doesn't get access to a very diverse set. It's lacking moves like Body Slam, as well as any coverage outside of water and ice type moves. Still, it gets access to Surf, of course, which is a fantastic same type attack bonus move, and when my move pool is this limited, I think it's going to be useful in this playthrough, unlike previous strategies that I've shown with Pokemon like Starmie. Okay, for starting moves, Seadra gets access to Bubble and Smokescreen. Bubble is nice because then I have an answer for Brock, and Smokescreen can be helpful sometimes. Lowering accuracy in Generation 1 is much stronger than in Generation 2 and beyond, because in these games it takes moves that are 100% accurate down to 66% accuracy with only one turn, whereas starting in Generation 2, it only cuts accuracy to 75%. Bubble is not a very good attacking move. It only has an effective power of 30 after the same type attack bonus, and yeah, it's just not good. I also want to mention the fact that Seadra's back sprite is really horrible. With so few pixels, it is really hard to make sharp corners look really convincing, and in this case, there's a lot of sharp lines, and it just is not working. Also, Seadra's nose looks like it is weirdly positioned, which was a phenomenon that we also saw in Horsey's back sprite a long time ago when I played those runs. Maybe Seaking's back sprite is going to be better? The answer is no, by the way. Seaking's is even worse. Just wait for it. Alright, so in the early game with Seadra, it is possible to do things on minimum battles, but in my first playthrough I tend to play overly safe, so I'm not going to be doing that. Instead, in Viridian Forest, I'm going to fight some optional bug catchers. The first one is this guy with 2 Metapods. I figured he would be quick to knock out and give decent experience. As I head through the forest, you're going to notice a few things about the overlay. It's an older version. This is because I didn't record an input replay for Seaking. We found this out later in the production process than I would have liked. If I had noticed earlier on, I think I would have pushed to release this video earlier in the year, but that would also break the synergy of the fact that I did Electrode versus Magneton first in the year. Those Pokemon take super effective damage from ground types. Then I did Dugtrio, Sandslash, and Marowak next, and those Pokemon take super effective damage from water types. So this video, Seaking versus Seadra, and I didn't want to mess up this nice arc by putting this video earlier in the year, so I probably still would have released it after the last Versus video. I clear out the mandatory bug catcher, and then once I arrive in the Pewter City gym, I face the junior trainer just because he's going to be fast experience. Defeating his Pokemon brings Seadra up to level 10. It now has 25 speed, so it's going to move first against both of Brock's Pokemon. There's no chance of me getting hit by a stray Bide in the case that Bubble isn't doing enough damage to the Onix. But let's be real, Brock's Pokemon are pretty awful against water type moves, so I don't think that was a threat either way. But there's only one way to find out. Well, I could calculate everything out ahead of time, and if that sounds appealing to you, you'll probably love Brilliant, the sponsor of this video. If you're watching my videos, I assume you're the analytical type, like me. That's why we're interested in comparing all of these species and their solo running capabilities. Brilliant is a platform where you learn by doing with thousands of interactive lessons in math, data analysis, programming, and AI. If you're curious about these subjects, on Brilliant you can learn about them through thousands of interactive lessons. And that's what I really love about this platform. form, it makes learning effective, letting you quickly internalize new skills by doing. Brilliant's lessons let you build problem-solving skills, like in this probability series, that really helped me with my understanding of mechanics in Pokemon. Brilliant also can help you develop a powerful daily learning habit, and that is a big component to skill development. After all, it's how I approach Pokemon here on this channel. By the way, there are also programming courses on Brilliant, which you might be interested in if you've seen things like my overlay and a bunch of the custom software we run on this channel. To highlight some content I think is relevant to Pokemon, the introduction to probability, predicting with probability, and exploring data visually are all great examples. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/scotsthoughts, or click on the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring the video. Now let's get some real-world experience against Brock. Brock's first Pokemon is Geodude. I go for Bubble, and I get a one-shot because of a critical hit. Nice. Next is Onix. I go for Bubble, and once again one-shot. So as expected, the first gym leader is completely trivial. Okay, up next is Route 3, and this is one of the main reasons I was training in Viridian Forest. The first bug catcher is a great example of this because his Caterpie takes 3 hits with Bubble to knock out. Sometimes in these cases, because of moves like Poison Sting, which the Weedle that follows has, you can get into tricky situations knocking these Pokemon out slowly. The same is also true for youngster Ben's team, and he's the next trainer. The Rattata can lower your defense with Tail Whip and do a lot of damage with Tackle and Quick Attack, and the Ekans can trap you with Wrap as well as poison you with Poison Sting. In the past with other water types like Poliwag, I have run into problems on this route if I don't do enough early game training, and I didn't want that to be the case with Seadra. My goal with these first playthroughs is to get a sense for how intuitive the Pokemon is, and also to complete the game at all costs. There's never going to be a time when I take too many resets and I just decide to restart the playthrough and try all over again. Once I start, I try to finish no matter how messy my results are. This isn't how I play follow-up attempts, but I'll save the description for those once we get there. After clearing Route 3 inside Mount Moon, I pick up the TM for Water Gun, which I can teach to Seadra, and it's a much needed upgrade over Bubble. Misty is coming up next, and defeating her early on will give me access to Bubble Beam, which massively speeds up my progress on Nugget Bridge. So I want to do some training in Mount Moon. I fight the Super Nerd who has good experience yields, grab a rare candy. There are going to be 11 of these in total that I have access to during a Pokemon Yellow playthrough. Keep that in mind for later on. I'm not going to mention collecting every single one throughout these runs. I battle the Bug Catcher for some quick experience, and also this Rocket, which gives me access to an additional Ether. This is useful for me to restore the PP of Water Gun later in the cave because I'm going to continue battling optional trainers. This Youngster, this Hiker, and finally this Rocket. Now whenever I open my bag, I'm trying to do as much as possible, so I'm going to teach Bide. This will be useful for Misty, and then I'm going to use the Ether to restore Water Gun's PP. This gives me enough uses of Water Gun to beat the Super Nerd, grab the Dome Fossil, and then finish off Jesse and James. Okay, heading into Cerulean City, I have to make a choice. Do I battle the rival on Nugget Bridge first, or do I go to Misty? And in this case, I chose to go for Misty because I want to get access to Bubble Beam as soon as possible. Inside her gym, there's one mandatory trainer, the Pecking Junior trainer. Her Goldeen can be really annoying with Supersonic and Tail Whip as a combo, although if you're not taking super effective damage from Peck, like Parasect did a long time ago, then she's not really a threat unless you get outstandingly unlucky due to confusion. Seadra takes some damage, forcing me to use a healing item after the battle, but it's not the worst thing in the world. I wasn't able to get to level 20, so I decided to face the Swimmer in the gym as well to get a little bit more experience, pushing me up over a damage rounding threshold, which will be important for Misty. If it can squeeze out any more damage per hit, it's going to help. Okay, so Misty's first Pokemon is Staryu. I go for Bide right away. She has good AI, which means her Staryu is only going to pick Tackle. Every turn there's a chance she'll replace its move with X-Defend, but in general Bide is quite reliable. I Unleash Energy, doing only a third, because Tackle isn't doing very much to Seadra. Instead I choose Water Gun, and it actually does an okay amount to Staryu, so I continue with this move until her lead faints. Against Starmie, I'm going to go back to using Bide. On the turn before I start accumulating energy, Starmie crits with Tackle, then Misty uses an X-Defend. Luckily, she goes back to using Tackle 2 more times, getting another crit before I unleash energy, and it does more than half. Okay, so since my health is getting a little bit low, I'm going to use Smokescreen a couple times against the Starmie to lower its accuracy. I didn't want to overcommit to this because there are significant diminishing returns to consistently using accuracy dropping tactics, so 2 should be enough. From there, I start using Water Gun. Remember, she's been setting up her defense. Her Starmie is all the way at +5 right now, and Water Gun is doing decent damage. In the end, Seadra is able to pull through with 13 hit points remaining. With Misty defeated, I get access to the Bubble Beam TM, and I'm going to teach this move to Seadra in the place of Bubble. Okay, time for the rival on Nugget Bridge. This one is really easy if you have a special move, so for both Seadra and Seaking, as long as I'm able to defeat Misty, the rival here is never going to be a problem. And the same can be true for all of the Nugget Bridge trainers that are typically problematic. This lass with her Pidgey cannot sand attack me because Bubble Beam one-shots. This guy with Zubat can never inflict Supersonic. The next lass with Pidgey is also still a one-hit, as well as the Nidoran female, which is nice because usually it survives hits. The following junior trainer with Mankey isn't an issue because I'm not a normal type. And finally, the Hiker is not a problem because I have water type moves. Sometimes he's really slow because you have to chip away at his Geodude. It's frustrating whenever it uses Defense Curl, but not in this case. Access to water type moves also gives me some additional quick training on this route. I can battle this Hiker with his Onix, which is an easy one-shot, and then this Hiker who has 3 Geodudes and 1 Machop. But the power of water type moves is about to run out because the early game grass types are coming for me now. At the end of Route 25, there is the Oddish Lass. When I did my Staryu video earlier in the year, I talked about factors which make water type Pokemon successful or unsuccessful. And one of the major factors is, does the water type have coverage against the early game grass types? And for Seadra, the answer is a resounding no. It gets Bubble, Water Gun, and Bubble Beam, and really its only coverage is the move Bide, which is not good against moves that inflict damage as well as healing the user. Here, if I was using Bide against the Oddish, every time it hits me with Absorb, the health that it heals is subtracted from the Bide counter so that Seadra will deal less damage per hit. That means I have to rely on Bubble Beam to knock out all of these Pokemon. Luckily for me, it's doing enough to the Oddishes to 2 hits, so she's not a problem, but this is not the last grass type trainer that could be an issue. On my way to Vermilion City, I have to face Sandy. She has 3 Pidgeys. Luckily for me, Water Gun is actually able to one-hit all of them, so no delays here. On the SSN, I do the safe play, picking up Rest so I have a healing move for later in the playthrough, and then I have to walk by the room that has Body Slam in it. I wish I got this. It would make Seadra so much better. Unfortunately, Seaking also does not get access to it, so we're going to see no Body Slam play during this video, which in some ways is kind of refreshing. The move is a little bit overused in Generation 1, although it's nothing near the overuse of a move like Return in Generation 2. I also pick up the rare Candy, and then I battle this trainer who has 1 Jigglypuff, just because she's really close to the beaten path, and I don't have to do any additional walking to get a little bit more experience. The reason I am trying to gain levels is because my speed is at 63, and Surge's Raichu has 65 speed. If I can move first against it, it's going to make his battle much more consistent. The rival is easy to crush with Bubble Beam, and defeating him does not give me enough experience to level Seadra up to 28. I had to make a choice here. Do I invest more and try and get the outspeed on the Seadra, or do I instead just head to Surge's gym and try and luck my way through it? I decided to go for the training, so once the SSN departs, I head over to Route 11 and battle one guy, this youngster who has a Nidoran male and a Nidorino. He gives me just enough experience to level up to 28, and now Seadra has exactly 66 speed. Perfect. Okay, let's face Surge. In yellow version, he only has 1 Pokemon. He does not have good AI, meaning he's going to randomly select moves. I use Smokescreen just to ruin his accuracy. He goes for X speed, raising Raichu's speed. Then I choose Bubble Beam. Raichu goes for Mega Kick, doing about 1/3. My water type move lowers his speed so that I'm once again faster. Rapidash hits with Bubble Beam, taking him down to orange health. Raichu uses Growl, lowering my attack, which is the perfect thing to do when I'm spamming Bubble Beam. And I hit it one more time, and that's that. Surge is defeated. As expected, everything is right with the world. Surge is completely incompetent. Okay, so we've seen a bunch of Seadra's footage. Now let's go to Seaking, who I played second. By the way, I did complete both of these runs on the same day. They were played on February 7th, 2024. So there's a little bit of a time machine effect going on here. I played these quite a while ago. When I received my Seaking in the lab, I named it Goldfish. It's a goldfish after all. I guess the nickname theme for this video is being extremely literal. Okay, so the early game for Seaking is a little bit bit more rough than with Seadra. This water-type Pokemon starts with Peck, Tail Whip, and Supersonic. It's a very strange set, and as I defeat the rival with Peck, which takes 5 turns, it's quite slow, we're going to see the move pool pop back up. Through level up, the only water-type move that Seaking gets access to is Waterfall at level 39. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, isn't Waterfall a Generation 2 move? And the answer is no. It is actually Seaking and Goldine's signature move in Generation 1, which is really cool. I'm hoping that I'm going to get a chance to use it at least once today so that I can say I used it during my Pokemon Yellow series, but I don't know if it's necessarily going to have a niche because I get it all the way at level 39. Before that, there is one useful move, Horn Attack at level 24, which has a base power of 65. This is going to be good coverage because, like I said, Seaking does not get access to Body Slam. Late into the game, it gets access to Agility at level 54. Seadra also gets access to this setup move, although much earlier on at level 41. Through TM and HM, the sets are basically identical, with Seaking having one additional move being Horn Drill. It's a one-hit KO move that has 30% accuracy, and you have to be faster than your opponent to even have a chance of hitting it. I'm sure this move is not going to see any play today. Right? Well, we're gonna have to wait for the end of the video to see if it ever does get used. Let's go through Seaking's base stats. It has 80 HP and 80 special, 92 attack, 65 defense, and 68 speed, giving it a 13.28% chance to crit in Generation 1. I think the thing I find most surprising about Seaking is that it's a physical attacker. Whenever I look at it, I don't get the sense that it is a physical attacker. However, it does have a giant horn on its head, and a lot of its moves are themed around this feature. Horn Drill and Horn Attack, of course, but Peck also has a description that references horns. I'm surprised Pokemon like Rhyhorn and Rhydon don't learn it. Anyways, the flying type coverage is actually helpful for Seaking because it can do fast training in the forest. Seaking is far superior when compared with Seadra in defeating all of the bug catcher's Pokemon, which is great because I need to make up for the fact that I'm going to have to beat Brock with a physical move that is not very effective. After defeating all of the mandatory bug catchers when I clear Viridian Forest, I am level 10. I battled the junior trainer inside of Brock's gym and this brings Seaking up to level 11, but I didn't think this was going to be enough for Brock. I can get fast experience in Viridian Forest battling more bug type Pokemon, as well as this last by the entrance which I skipped when I first came through this area. I continued training on wild Pokemon until I reached level 13 over a damage rounding threshold. By the way, in Pokemon games, level is factored into the damage calculation, so whenever the level ends in 0, 3, 5, or 8, you have received a non-linear damage boost over the previous level. This effect is much more pronounced at lower levels, so getting to level 13 is hopefully going to give me 1 or 2 more damage against Brock's Pokemon. Well, let's be realistic, in the best case scenario, it's probably only going to be 1 extra damage. Now here's a cute little trick that I did. I purchased an escape rope in the Pewter City Pokemart, so I can use that to escape Viridian Forest very quickly, going back to the Pewter City Pokemon Center. Because in Generation 1, this does not teleport you outside of the cave, it brings you back to the last center you used. Okay, so now it's time to see how Seaking does against Brock. Geodude is first, I immediately go for Supersonic. This move has 55% accuracy. Using it is painful. Luckily for me, it inflicts confusion. Brock's Geodude uses Tackle, and it only does 4 damage. Now, the reason I set up with Supersonic is because then when I use Tail Whip to lower the Geodude's defense, every time it hits itself in confusion, it's going to deal more damage to itself. Remember the Goldeen inside of Misty's gym? Yeah, I have the exact same moveset as it has. There is beautiful synergy here. As I use Supersonic to confuse Brock's Pokemon and then lower their defenses with Tail Whip, I am also increasing the damage that Peck will eventually do when I attack. The only downside here is using Supersonic, and confusion itself is not particularly reliable. Even though I'm relying on a lucky strategy, I managed to make it past the Geodude with more than half health. And from here, I think things are going to get easier. I misclick using Peck against the Onix on turn 1, so I'm making things harder for myself. It uses Screech, lowering my defense, but then I can use Supersonic. When I confuse Onix, if it uses Bide and hits itself, it will cancel the accumulation of damage. I can also infinitely stall Bide with either Supersonic or Tail Whip. I thought that things were going to go well here, but then Supersonic keeps missing. I have my defense lowered. I fail 2 Supersonics during a Bide. Onix hits me with Bind, doing 4 damage per turn. It lasts for 3 hits, and it brings Seaking down to 1 hit point. Okay, so Onix is at near full health. I think I have lost this. Maybe I should level up to 15, although I'm not really sure how that's going to improve my odds. Maybe I just need to luck through here with Supersonic. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but Supersonic inflicts confusion. Onix uses Screech when it attacks. My Tail Whip starts to stack up, so it's dealing more and more damage to itself in self-inflicted confusion. And yes, the Onix never attacks me again, and Seaking pulls through with 1 hit point. Okay, that is a seriously hype win. Now let's head on to Route 3, where I want to mention the fact that Seaking crushes these trainers just because it has access to Peck. All of the early game bugs are so much faster to knock out. This gives me an option which I didn't take with Seadra to battle this bug catcher who has better experience yields. With Seadra I instead battled the Lass because she only has 2 Pokemon. With Route 3 behind me, I head into Mount Moon and pick up the Water Gun TM. I really wish this item was available before Brock. That would make so many runs much more simple, and it would really improve a lot of water type results. After all, one of my criteria for if a water Pokemon is going to be successful in a playthrough is, does it start with a move that can help it solve Brock? And I guess Seaking kind of does in the form of Supersonic, but Water Gun or Bubble would be much better. Since I had to overlevel for Brock, I do less training in Mount Moon. The Super Nerd, the Bug Catcher, and the Hiker with 3 rock type Pokemon. After that, just the 2 mandatory trainers, and then I'm off to Cerulean City. Like with Seadra, I think the best choice here is to get a quick Bubble Beam by defeating Misty, and Seaking with Peck is much better equipped to defeat her right away. Inside the gym I skip the swimmer, fight the mandatory junior trainer, then I teach Seaking Bide, and with it I'm ready to take on Misty. I can use Peck to knock out the Staryu in 4 hits, and then Bide for the Starmie. Now Seaking's higher base HP is actually very helpful for it here because it can sustain more hits from the Starmie. Also, there is a hilarious interaction here. If I confuse the Starmie with Supersonic and then use Bide, if it deals damage to itself, that damage is added to Bide's counter, so I will pay back even more when I unleash energy. My first hit does about 3/4, and from there I use Peck, getting a critical hit, knocking the Starmie out in only 2 more turns. This is the last time I'm going to mention the rival on Nugget Bridge because he is completely irrelevant for both of these Pokemon. As I make my way through Route 25, I don't fight optional trainers like I did with Seadra. Interestingly enough, by the time I beat the last mandatory trainer, Seaking levels up to 24 where it can learn Horn Attack, which I put in the place of Supersonic. Okay, so remember the Oddish trainer? Even Horn Attack would have helped Seadra out, but I have Peck for her Oddishes, so they are 1 hits. Seaking doesn't need to worry about the early grass types. But I'm going to mention here as we face the rocket just outside of Cerulean City that Seaking does need to worry about its back sprite. What is going on with this one? You know when you scale an image with only the horizontal dimension and it looks like everything gets kind of compressed? Yeah, it looks like that happened to Seaking's sprite. Now, I don't think they literally did that, but when designing this sprite, I'm sure they had to fit what was more of a horizontal design into a square space. If you didn't know, when the sprite is pushed onto the screen, there is a little bit of a margin of white space at the edge of the screen over on the left. Here, I'll point an arrow at it. If you design the sprite so that Seaking's tail was, say, off screen, then it would look like it just disappeared into that white space, and it looks really bad. When designing sprites, all of the ones that are implemented in Generation 1 by Game Freak, none of them have the Pokemon overflowing onto the left-hand side. I always keep this in mind when designing my own sprites, and sometimes I do get stuck in this situation where I have to horizontally compress a Pokemon, which always causes awkward things to happen. In Generation 2, the developers got around this with solutions like Dawnfan, where it's just a trunk and they basically don't show the rest of the Pokemon, creating the visual illusion that the Pokemon is sitting lower down on the screen behind the text box. I think this solution could have made Seaking look better in Generation 1, but we have this complete mess instead. So these two have bad back sprites, but they are by far not the worst. There are still Pokemon, and water types at that I have yet to play that have even worse back sprites, but we're going to have to wait for a later video to see those. With Seaking, I want to mention Sandy, because Horn Attack is an advantage here. I can one-shot her Pidgeys with it, or with Bubble Beam, giving me more play with my PP, which is really important. That means I'm going to need less center trips to heal my Pokemon in the second playthrough. On the SSN, I pick up the Rest TM, of course, as well as the Rare Candy, and then I go up against the rival. With Seadra, I was seduced into a little bit of extra training before Surge to get the speed needed to move first against the Raichu, but with Seaking and its lower speed stat, there is no way for that to be possible, so I'm just going to cut the early training and try Surge at a lower level. He is, as you would expect, simple. By the way, I'm using Bubble Beam here, but the correct choice is Horn Attack. It does slightly more damage to the Raichu. That said, it just goes for Mega Kick twice, and I was a little bit worried because I get brought to low health, but then it uses Growl, doing nothing. My Bubble Beam lowers its speed, giving Seaking the chance to move first, and because of this, I knock the Raichu out with one more hit. I wish I could say this is the last we're going to see of Surge, but he is going to come back for revenge later on. Okay, time for the wrapping last, the enemy of all water types in the early game of Pokemon Yellow. For Seadra, I don't have a move to defeat her Pokemon, but with Seaking, access to Peck is excellent here. I one-shot the Oddish, meaning she can't hit me with Stun Spore, so the Bellsprout can't wrap away, and because of that, this is just a free win. Inside Rock Tunnel, Horn Attack helps out against the Slowpoke, making them faster to knock out, and Peck once again helps against the Status Condition Junior Trainer. I one-shot her Oddish because I get a critical hit, but not the Bulbasaur, so the Oddish could survive and use Sleep Powder or Stun Spore potentially, but overall Seaking is very capable in this battle. The Self-Destructing Hiker is a series of 3 1-hits, and then the final last in the cave does have an Oddish, and it puts Seaking to sleep. This is what I was talking about before. It drains some health with Absorb, but it's not doing enough damage to be a threat. South of Lavender Town, I grabbed the TM for Swift, which could be useful in the later stages of the mid-game. I'm thinking specifically against Sabrina. When I did my Goldeen playthrough, it was one of the first times, maybe the first time, that I realized I could use Agility in combination with Swift and Flash to get free wins against the Psychic-type specialist. An issue for Seaking there is that I would need to be level 54 though, and that's quite high when facing Sabrina. So we'll see if it's useful, but I'd rather have it for my first playthrough. Inside the Rocket Hideout, which is technically an optional area because I allow the Marowak skip, I collect some items which are usually useful to sell in the department store for extra vitamins. Here is the Horn Drill TM, by the way. I'm sure that's not going to be relevant later in the video. On the next floor, I fight one Rocket and grab the TM for Double Edge. This could be useful later on if I need a little bit more damage. Again, my philosophy with these first playthroughs is play safely so that I'm not going to get stuck late into the game. I'll refine my strategy for the follow-ups and get a lot riskier then. At the end of the hideout, playing into this idea of safety, I pick up an additional rare candy. In the department store, I grab the TM for Ice Beam, and then I purchase Calcium. By the way, a fact that not many people know, I think, is that in Generation 2, these vitamins still raise both your special attack and your special defense. So it always feels great when using a special user in either one of these first 2 generation games, because buying Calcium is asymmetrically benefiting this Pokemon, whereas a Pokemon that has to buy Protein is only getting a boost to its attacking stat. I also teach Ice Beam in the place of Water Gun, and I use it against the rival in Pokemon Tower. It one-shots his Fearow, his Magnemite doesn't have any electric type moves, his Shelter is completely trash, at least for now. This thing is going to become a nuisance later on. Sandshrew is a one-hit, and the Eevee takes 2. Okay, Agatha Jr., she has 2 Ghastly. I didn't even heal for this fight. I think that's a little bit overconfident. I'm using Ice Beam just in case it freezes, because I know that Seaking is not going to be able to one-hit. The Ghastlies bring me down to low red health. Luckily, Seaking just barely pulls through. At the top of the tower, I crush Jesse and James, and then I head off to Cycling Road to do some additional training. I only fight a total of 3 trainers here, the Grimer guy, the guy with 2 Weezing, and then the guy with 5 Pokemon. This brings Seaking up to level 36, which is kind of ideal because in the Safari Zone, a lot of the wild encounters are at level 36. This is their maximum level, so using a Repel, I can get rid of most wild encounters, except the ones at the max level, so I do end up running into a Nidoran. This is one reason when playing Pokemon Yellow, you might choose to level up before going to the Safari Zone, just to avoid the small time loss that is incurred every time you get a wild encounter, even though you're using a Repel. Okay, so at the end of the Safari Zone, I have to make the most important choice with any water type. Do I teach it Surf, or do I not teach it Surf? Obviously, with both Seaking and Seadra, Surf makes sense. Their move pools are just not diverse enough. My next destination is Saffron City because I want to do training in Silph. The reason this is my next location is because I'm not entirely confident Ice Beam has enough damage against Erica right now, and Koga is problematic with water types just because 2 of his Venonats have Sleep Powder, which they prioritize against me because of type effectiveness. Also, there's a high density of trainers here, so training is efficient, plus the rival's Magneton isn't very scary in this fight. His lead Sandslash goes down to a single Surf. Cloyster is next, and while it is annoying, the only move it can choose against me is Supersonic, which has a propensity to miss. As you can see, it just doesn't do anything twice, and I knock out the water type. Next is Magneton. I get a critical hit with Surf, one-shotting it, so that is fantastic. Seaking can then use Horn Attack against Kadabra for a guaranteed one-hit, and all that's left is Flareon. Remember, in Generation 1, this thing has incredible special, so Surf is not going to do enough damage. It gets in 1 Sand Attack as a result, and this foils one of my waterfalls. I did learn Seaking's signature move, and I do use it in this case, but it's pretty useless unless I'm using it to conserve PP because Surf just has a higher effective power, and I had access to it before I got Waterfall. By the way, you might be thinking about Waterfall's secondary effect, which is a 20% chance to flinch, but that was introduced in Generation 4, so right now it's basically just a worse version of Surf. With Giovanni defeated, my Seaking is now level 43, almost level 44, so I'm going to head back to Celadon City and face Erica next. next. Inside her gym, I face the Cool Trainer for maximum experience yields on minimum battles, in this location, obviously not in the whole playthrough, and then I go up against Erica, the Grass-type specialist. Okay, my Seaking is really overleveled, 44 against her roughly level 30 Pokemon. Ice Beam one-shots the Tangela, and the Weepinbell and Gloom have the same fate. Okay, I need Surf outside of battle, and I don't want to fight Sabrina next because my speed is quite low. I'm not even going to move first against the Abra. I could use Swift, but I want to fight Koga right now anyways. Inside the gym, there's the Juggler, but I have Surf for his Pokemon. It's just barely not doing enough damage to knock out all of the Drowsies in one hit. It has a roll here, so apparently I can sometimes knock them out and other times I can't. Inside the gym, I continue my training against Tamers, which are optional, but they have fantastic experience yields. Once they're defeated, and I've cleared the last mandatory trainer, Seaking is ready to face Koga at level 46. What I was hoping for here is a one-shot against all the Venonats so I can avoid Sleep Powder. The first one goes down, the second one is a slightly higher level, and it survives. It hits Toxic before I knock it out, and you can see that I've started using Ice Beam. This is just so I have the chance of freezing the next Venonat. One way to lose against Koga is if the Venonat gets a special drop and then the Venomoth deals a lot of damage with its Psychics, plus I won't be able to do very much to the Venomoth. Luckily for me, no special drops, I move on to his ace Pokemon, which of course is an Electric Grass type. By the way, welcome new viewers, it is great to have you here. Everything will eventually make sense, I promise. Okay, back to the Venomoth. The issue here is that Toxic is starting to stack up. It sets up with Double Team, which causes Seaking to miss a Surf, and that was critical. Venomoth does chip damage with Leech Life, my next Surf misses again, I take massive poison damage, and without a critical hit, I am not going to win. Seaking doesn't pull it off, and as a result, this is my first reset of the video. Some people ask me why I don't black out and why I choose to reset instead. Well, there's a couple reasons. Number one, it's a little bit cleaner just going right back into the battle after resetting the cartridge. Another reason is it keeps incrementing the game time, and it also makes experience routing a little bit harder to figure out in follow-up playthroughs. Because then I defeated some trainer-boosted experience Pokemon on Koga's team, but I won't be able to fight those same Pokemon in a follow-up route if I need the same amount of experience for a key threat in the future. There's also the factor that I am just used to resetting now. That's how I play these games. So yeah, maybe it's also just stylistic. In some cases though, it doesn't make sense because you have to solve a gym puzzle, but Koga's gym is fairly quick to navigate once the trainers have been cleared. Either way, in my next fight, I make it to the Venomoth. I'm not poisoned this time, and as a result, it goes for Toxic, but the status condition never has a chance to stack up, and as a result, I win. With him defeated, I earned the Soul Badge, and despite the dialogue that the game has, this boosts my speed stat, which is very good for Seaking, which is the slower of the two Pokemon. But I think we need to get back to Seadra and see how it does throughout this section of the game, because things are not as good for it against the Wrapping Lass. I do not have a move that even deals neutral damage to her grass types. I'm preparing for the fight, and you can see here that I briefly open up my inventory and consider teaching Seadra Rest, just to maybe make this a little bit more consistent, but in the end I decided against it and went into the battle and just relied on Bubble Beam. Thing is, I get lucky right away because the Oddish immediately poisons Seadra. Due to this, my speed isn't cut, and Bellsprout cannot infinitely wrap me. That said, Wrap is still scary with this status condition because every turn Wrap inflicts damage, it also triggers my poison. Luckily for me, Bubble Beam is doing half to the Bellsprout, so I'm able to knock it out in 2 hits. I can't 2-hit the following Oddish though, it takes 3 in total, so I take more poison damage as well as absorb damage along the way. I have arrived at the final Bellsprout with orange health. I wasn't really confident here, I thought this was going to be my first reset, but it goes for Wrap, misses, and I get a second Bubble Beam, which doesn't knock it out. It survives with a Sliver, although it just tries another Wrap, missing again, and then Seadra wins. Okay, so I lucked through the Wrapping Lass. It didn't feel great. This would have been bad either way. Maybe Rest is the option that I need there to heal the poison status condition to make this all just much more consistent. Inside Rock Tunnel, I expected things to slow down using Bubble Beam against the Slowpoke. However, on the second turn, I get a critical hit, which greatly speeds up my progress. The status condition Junior Trainer also poisons Seadra, which is much better than Sleep. Bubble Beam is okay here, it 3-hits both of her Pokemon, and luckily there's no problems in this battle. But I can't say the same thing for the Junior Trainer at the end of the tunnel. While I do manage to 1-hit the Meowth at the beginning of the fight, the Oddish survives, uses Sleep Powder, and then Seadra sleeps for 1, 2, 3, and 4 turns before it finally wakes up. All of that time allowed Oddish to sap my health with Absorb, and because of this, I don't have the damage I need to knock it out quickly enough. So Seadra gets its first reset here. And if you think that's bad, it continues to get worse because Seadra gets its second reset here. Once again, the Oddish puts me to sleep, and I snooze for way too long. The way I get by her is I critical hit the Oddish, which does not one hit, but at least it's on low health. It doesn't use sleep powder, and so I win. Yeah, that was pure luck. So when I sat down to do these playthroughs, I figured that Seadra's stats were better and I expected it to perform much better throughout the game. But now that we've seen this far into the runs, it really does seem like Seaking is outperforming. Access to Peck in the early game makes Brock a little bit more difficult, but I was able to luck through that fight, and from there it's just far more capable with normal and flying type damage. That said, everything is about to change for Seadra. I pick up the Swift TM, which is my first normal type damage dealing move, which I put in the place of Bide. In the Rocket Hideout, I pick up the TM for Double Edge, and in the department store, I get the TM for Ice Beam. I teach this move right away because I want coverage against grass types. Unfortunately, there aren't too many more of them outside of Erica's gym, and I can delay fighting her until just before Giovanni. Like with Seaking, I purchase 4 Calcium and then take on the rival in Pokemon Tower. This is where Seaking starts to hit its stride, in the mid-game. It has Bubble Beam, Ice Beam, and Swift, so it's decent coverage for it, and soon enough, in 9 levels, I'm gonna get access to Agility, my badge boosting move. I went into the fight with Agatha Jr. a little bit damaged. This ended up getting very close. The first Ghastly hits me with Nightshade. I knock it out, move on to the second one, which hits me with Confuse Ray. Luckily, Seadra does not hit itself, and I win. With Pokemon Tower behind me, I fight one additional trainer on Cycling Road over what Seaking fought. It's this cue ball with a Primeape and a Machoke. He has decent experience yields because these are evolved Pokemon. At the end of the Safari Zone, I teach Surf in the place of Water Gun, and then I head back to Celadon City using Dig. I made the choice to fight Erica next. My reasoning was simple. I figured that Seadra would be able to defeat her with Ice Beam, utilizing its higher special stat. Tangle is up first, I go for Ice Beam, and I get the one hit, so this is looking good. Weepinbell also falls, I got a critical hit there, and last is Gloom. I don't crit it, but I still have enough damage, so Erica was simple for Seadra. With her complete, I head to Silph. Well, I try to, and then I realize that I forgot to get the fresh water, so that's a little bit of inefficiency. I have to backtrack to the department store to buy one. This costs about 45 seconds of time, and it's a major mistake. If this was a follow-up run, I would be restarting right here. Silph is my next location, and here I battle every trainer that has good experience yields. I do think I went a little bit overboard with Seadra. I probably could have just trained to level 41 to get agility, but I train up past it all the way to level 43. I think Rival 5 is going to be simple now. My set is approaching what it's going to be at the very end of the game. There's only 2 substitutions that are possible to make from here on out. His Sandslash goes down to a single Surf, next is Cloyster, and I'm able to 3-hit, just barely missing the 2-hit range. I would definitely get it at level 45, but it's just not necessary. While I'm confused for the Magneton, I don't hit myself doing more than half. Thundershock doesn't inflict paralysis, Seadra snaps out of confusion, and I move on to the Kadabra. Quick trivia question, which move does more damage to it? Is it Surf with the higher effective power, or Swift with the lower effective power but dealing physical damage? And the answer is Swift. Here are the damage ranges. Although both of them are 2 hits, so it doesn't really matter what I chose. In this case, Kadabra just uses Recover, wasting its turn, and I knock it out on the second hit. Flareon is last, and of course it's weak to Surf. While I battle Giovanni, I will explain why I'm not going up against the rival's Jolteon team. Some of you might wonder, isn't it the most challenging to face the Jolteon team? After all, this is supposed to be a solo challenge. Well, not really. Jolteon is actually sometimes easier with water types. Like, for example, when I recently streamed Starmie, his Jolteon team was much easier to defeat in the champion battle. This is because in Generation 1, Magneton has higher special when compared with Jolteon, but it also has higher defense, so it survives earthquakes more easily, and it also survives surfs more easily. Plus, Jolteon has Thunder so it can miss, whereas Magneton has Thunderbolt. So in this case, the Flareon team is both the fastest team to defeat because I don't have to do an additional battle battling the rival on Route 22 in the early game, and it's also the hardest team to defeat. Believe me, while Cloyster wasn't an issue here, it's gonna become problematic as the game progresses. Just give it some time. Okay, here's a small advantage for Seadra over Seaking. Whenever I have to backtrack to a city more than once in a playthrough, it costs time. I want to avoid this if possible. So immediately after defeating Giovanni when I dig out of Silph, I have the choice, do I fly to a different city or walk north and fight Sabrina? The reason I skipped her with Seaking is because I didn't have the speed required to move first. But since I have agility and Swift, which bypasses accuracy checks, Seadra is going to get a free win over the psychic type specialist. Well, that was how it was supposed to work. Okay, here's how the strategy goes. Against the Abra, I spam agility, it hits me with flash. Every time my stats are altered, even my accuracy, my badge boosts are going to compound on top of each other, raising my attack stat. Then Swift bypasses accuracy checks, so I can deal massive damage with it against the frail Psychic type Pokemon, usually one-shotting all of them. However, there is one complicating factor here. My Seadra is very close to leveling up, so once it defeats the Abra, it is going to reset all of its badge boosts, because when a Pokemon levels up, all of its stats are recalculated by the game. This leaves me in a not great position against the Kadabra. I go for Swift, hoping to get the one-shot. Even with a critical hit, I don't. Luckily, it chooses Psywave and misses. That move is completely trash. My next Swift knocks it out and I move on to the Alakazam. Alright, this is where things get really tricky. Swift gets another critical hit, taking Alakazam down to half health. It sets up with Reflect, so now it's going to take less damage from my attacks. But I'm a little lucky here. I only got hit by one flash from the Abra because I realized I wasn't going to be able to chain agility endlessly and badge boost my way to a victory. I choose to go for Ice Beam next in the hopes of eventually freezing the Alakazam. It chooses Psywave, and it does 1 damage. Literally the lowest possible damage roll for this move. By the way, I absolutely love it when this happens. It just proves to me how bad Psywave really is. And if you ever want to know how bad the move is, just play Generation 2 and start with a Misdreavus. Now Sabrina doesn't have good AI, so she's randomly choosing her moves, and that's good for me. She selects Reflect and Recover, and eventually Seadra pulls through, hitting a Surf. Not a dominant win, like it should have been with Swift. Really, I should have battled one more trainer in Sabrina's gym just to level up to prevent it. I'll be able to do that next time if I still think this is the best strategy, but for now, I'm headed to Fuchsia City to take on Koga. Okay, Venonat number 1. Hopefully Surf is gonna get the one hit, and it does. Venonat 2 also falls to a single Surf, and so does the third one. This was much better than with Seaking. For Venomoth, Surf does half damage. It sets up double team, but this doesn't prevent my second Surf, and Koga is essentially a clean sweep. I did not take a single hit point of damage. Okay, from here for Seadra, the next 2 trainers should be fairly simple. I have Blaine and then Giovanni. Before battling the Fire-type specialist, I battled this Fisher on my way to Cinnabar Island, and today is the day that we are going to introduce new art for him. I nicknamed this trainer Psych, after Ike the Killer, who mentioned to me that this trainer is very good to fight for experience yields. So here is the avatar that Serena drew for Ike, and here is Psych's avatar. I think it's perfect, honestly. Amazing. I do just want to say that Ike the Killer's favorite type of Pokemon is Fire types, so I find it really perfect that he has now been the inspiration for a Water-type trainer within my series. And this fight seems very thematic for the entire video because here Seadra is dispatching a bunch of Seaking. Okay, so Blaine is coming up next, and I need to state that he is the best gym leader in Pokemon Yellow. He is absolutely terrifying even when I'm using a Water type because his Fire type Pokemon have good physical attack stats, so they can hit hard with moves like Stomp and Takedown. Blaine leads with Ninetales, which is by far the least scary Pokemon for Seadra to face. I'm just barely not able to one-shot with Surf. It hangs on with a sliver of health, and he uses one of his signature super potions. Next is Rapidash, but it has lower special, so I'm able to one-shot with Surf and move on to his final Pokemon, Arcanine. Okay, all is right with the world. Apparently this Water type is not going to struggle with the Fire type specialist. I get a critical hit, and that's that. With the Volcano badge, I have now earned myself a boost to my special stat. Okay, we're going to jump right into the next gym battle against Giovanni. For Seadra, this one isn't a problem because it's faster than the Dugtrio and can one-hit with Surf. Beyond that, there could be problems with the Persian if it set up double team and then attacked multiple times with a move like Slash, but if that doesn't happen, once the normal type faints, Nidoqueen, Nidoking, and Rhydon are all simple one-hits. The rival before the league is a little bit of a different story. I have Surf for the Sandslash, Ice Beam manages to one-shot the Execute, I move on to the Cloyster, which I'm going to have to knock out with Surf. Luckily for me, it only takes 2 hits and misses a Supersonic along the way. Okay, time for Magneton. This thing has finally become terrifying. It now knows both Thunder Wave and Thunder Shock. In this case, it chooses the status move first, paralyzing me, but then because of the AI modifications, it knows that I have a status condition and it's only going to choose Thunder Shock. I thought that I could play around this because with agility, I can reset my speed to its default value and then boost it with the stage modifier. The game never checks the paralysis status condition again, so I'm going to be able to outspeed the remainder of his Pokemon. Although I have to defeat them when paralyzed. Surf doesn't do enough to Kadabra, it uses Psychic, but Seadra survives. However, the Psychic drops my special, and this causes all of my stats to be recalculated. In a case like this, the game does reapply the paralysis debuff, so my speed gets cut, Kadabra moves first, and Seadra faints. Alright, so that was a really annoying loss. I come back in, it takes 3 hits to knock out the Cloister this time. Looks like sometimes I have enough damage and sometimes I don't. This time Magneton just goes for Thundershock, but it does a lot of damage, so I arrive at the Kadabra with low-ish health. If it chooses Psychic, I'm probably gonna lose. But it goes for Recover and then Psybeam, which Seadra survives. Because of this, I move on to the Flareon, but remember, this thing has a lot of special. I was worried it would survive, but even if it did, it would only attack with either Smog or Leer, and I think Seadra would survive the Smog because it's such a bad move. Although it doesn't matter, because Seadra has enough damage and Flareon faints. Before the Elite Four, it is time to use some rare candies. I boost Seadra from level 53 all the way up to level 60. I teach Mimic in the place of Swift, and now I'm ready for Lorelei. But before we jump into the Elite Four, I want to go back to Seaking's footage and let this thing catch up. Just like with Seadra, I face Psych for extra experience, and then after Pokemon Mansion, I go up against Blaine. This battle is a little bit harder for Seaking because it has a lower special stat, so I'm doing less damage to the fire types. Ninetales is still a 2-hit, Rapidash is a 2-hit in this case, which is quite annoying, and after it goes down I have a chance to learn Horn Drill, which once again I'm going to say no to. As I've said many times before, there's obviously no reason to use this terrible move. Last is Blaine's Arcanine, it goes for Flamethrower, which does like almost nothing, and then just tries Reflect, so I knock it out with 2 Surfs and earn myself the Volcano badge. Hopefully though, this Seaking fight showed you why Blaine can be intimidating. I was taken to Orange Health, and Blaine definitely didn't play as well as he could have. Next is the Saffron City Gym, where I'll face Sabrina, but before her I teach Seaking Swift in the place of Waterfall. I just want to be able to bypass accuracy checks with a physical move in case the Kadabra hits me with Kinesis, and yeah, that's exactly what happens. Now I have Swift for the Alakazam, which does half, then it sets up Reflect, my next one does about a quarter, it goes for Recover, then hits a decently big Psy Wave, and after that connects with Psychic, so Seaking faints. Even though I played Seadra badly during this fight, Seaking definitely has a disadvantage here. The fact that I don't have access to Agility yet means I cannot pair it with Swift for a free win, and without that I have to contend with Sabrina using Psychic with her amazing Alakazam. This time it gets a critical hit. It also lowers my special, but this badge boosts my attack and makes Swift do more damage, so Alakazam faints and I don't get 2 losses here. Inside Giovanni's gym, once I'm beating the last mandatory trainer, this black belt, I don't have quite enough experience to level up to 50 over the next damage rounding threshold. Also, Seaking's speed is kind of low right now, only 115. I fight one more trainer to level up to 50 so that I can use rare candies in order to outspeed Giovanni's fastest 2 Pokemon, the Dugtrio and the Persian. During the level ups I get to 54 where I teach Agility in the place of Swift. I continue using rare candies all the way up to level 58 where Seaking has 137 speed. Now I'm prepared for Giovanni. I can one-hit the Dugtrio, Persian's next, which goes down to 2 Surfs, and from there it's simple, again 1 hits, even though my special stat is lower in comparison with Seadra's. Okay, time for Rival 6, and I make a misplay here. I go for Agility turn 1 to set up on the Sandslash. I was trying to badge boost, but like I did with Seadra against Sabrina, I am about to level up. I quickly realize this. After a Poison Sting, I use Surf and knock out the Sandslash. I level up, use Ice Beam on the Execute for a 1-hit, and then against the Cloister, I can set up more with Agility if I really want to, but I didn't think I needed it. I have enough speed to move first against all of his Pokemon, so I just go for Surf and it does half. Then the Cloister Supersonic hits, which is a rare occurrence. It hasn't been doing very well throughout this video, but it doesn't prevent me from hitting a Surf and knocking it out. Okay, so Supersonic is also bad because sometimes you just snap out of confusion and it doesn't even deal any damage, which is what happens here against the Magneton. It goes for Thundershock, the better of the 2 options, and I finish it. Kadabra isn't an issue with Seaking because I have a physical move, leaving only the Flareon. And because I've used my rare candies, Surf is able to get the 1-hit. Inside Victory Road, I don't fight any trainers. I want to get to the league as fast as possible. I don't have rare candies to use before Lorelei, but I'm going to teach Mimic in the place of Horn Attack. Now, that might seem like a weird choice, but I think overall it's going to be better than keeping the normal type move for this battle. Okay, so here's my strategy. I can damage the Dugong turn 1, forcing it to use Rest on turn 2. Then I can set up with Agility, and hopefully this will give me enough damage to 3-shot her first Pokemon and 2-shot her following Cloister. Once I get to the Slowbro, then I can Mimic Amnesia, set up my special stat, and have enough damage to knock out both the Jinx and the Lapras fairly quickly. Using Amnesia makes me take less damage from the Slowbro's Psychic, but that's the only special move Lorelei is going to use against me from here. The Jinx is only going to be choosing between Double Slap and Thrash, and the Lapras has a choice between Body Slam and Confuse Ray. Rivalry. It turns out setting up my special is not as straightforward as I was thinking. The Slowbro is still dealing decent damage to me, plus Silph does very little to it because it's also set up with Amnesia. Luckily, I'm able to knock it out in 4 hits, but I only have 25 hit points remaining. Silph one-shots her Jinx, and I make it to her final Pokemon Lapras. I go for Silph with my boosted special. I don't have enough damage, but I did have enough to take it to low red health, where she uses a super potion, giving me one more turn, and that's that. Okay, cue the silly music. It is time for the Hiker. One of the worst trainers in the game. Yeah, I just sweep with Silph. The Machamp takes 2 hits, but whatever. It actually used Submission. I guess he did damage to me, which is better than in some playthroughs. Agatha's next. Mimic Substitute here, set up with Agility, then sweep her team using Silph or Ice Beam. There are some downsides to this strategy. Substitute is not a perfect defense. For example, both the Haunter and the final Gengar can hit me with Hypnosis, and then they can use Dream Eater to break my Substitute. Things were a little bit sketchy here when that happens, but luckily I'm able to get my Substitute re-established. Arbok is a one-shot, and that leads to the final Gengar. Turn 1, because Agatha does not have good AI, and she has no AI modification that tells her what to do with Dream Eater, she just chooses this move when I'm not asleep. Then Seaking gets a critical hit, and that's that. So we've made it to Lance. This one's going to be straightforward after the Gyarados. I don't really have a good move for it, so I use Silph a bunch, and eventually I choose Ice Beam. This freezes the Gyarados, leaving it on a sliver of health. Because it's frozen, and there is no way for Lance to defrost, I'm just going to set up with Agility, maxing out my speed stat and badge boosting everything as much as possible. From here, this ensures that I outspeed the Aerodactyl, which otherwise I would not have. Even if I level up and lose my badge boosts, I still have my stage modifiers for my speed, so Aerodactyl is a one-shot, and so is his final Dragonite. With that win, Seaking has made it to the champion. I typically don't like doing this fight without rest because the ability to heal is fantastic, but with Silph on my set, I'm a little bit constrained and I'm gonna have to use the water type move for special damage against the Cloyster. It's always annoying when this is the case, but there's nothing else that I can really do. Of course, I want to set up with Agility to badge boost me, but because I used my rare candies early on, I'm mid-level right now, so I'll probably level up and lose them before the Cloyster, which is unfortunate. To ensure I have good damage against the Magneton, I mimic Earthquake, although remember, Magneton has fantastic defense. Sandslash is a one-hit, and so is the Alakazam with my newly acquired physical move. Executor I can use Ice Beam for, and I get a freeze, so it's never able to set up with Leech Seed, which is perfect. Okay, time for Magneton. This Pokemon is so frustrating. Gyarados was not able to one-shot it with the route that I eventually came up with, but Seaking is over-leveled and has a decent attack stat, so it does get the one-shot, even though I just leveled up. Next is Cloyster. I go for Silph. It does more than half with a critical hit. The champion retaliates with Spike Cannon, getting a critical hit, but it only damages Seaking twice. This gives me one more attack, and Silph does not do enough damage. The Cloyster survives on the tiniest sliver. As a result, it gets another Spike Cannon, and Seaking takes a reset. Okay, so it turns out I forgot 3 rare candies in my bag. If I had used them, I would not have had the mid-battle level up and lost my badge boosts, and I also would have had more damage for the Cloyster. So that reset is entirely player error. Just a blunder on my part. In the next battle against the champion, I make it back to the Cloyster. This time I am afflicted by Leech Seed, but Cloyster isn't doing enough damage and Seaking has more than enough health, so even if I do take 3 hits, I can still knock out the champion's penultimate Pokemon. That leaves only the Flareon. It goes for Quick Attack, does pathetic damage, Silph hits, and his final Mon faints. With that, I clock in with my first playthrough time of 55 minutes and 57 seconds, with 69 centiseconds. 3 resets, 0 blackouts at level 67, with a game time of 3 hours and 34 minutes. I will confess I was hoping for a time that would be under 50 minutes for my first playthrough, but Seaking wasn't good enough to achieve that with the level of conservative play that I was going for. And I expected Seadra to be better than Seaking, but it turns out it's also not going to get a sub 50 minute time. It's starting the battle against Lorelei with just over 51 minutes on its clock. The strategy here is exactly the same when compared with Seaking, although Seadra has an advantage because its special is higher, so I should be able to get this done with a little bit more ease. That is, unless the Slowbro gets a lucky critical hit with Psychic and knocks Seaking out before I take it down. That's a really frustrating reset. It doesn't happen again. This time I finished the Slowbro, and from there the Jinx is a one-hit, and the Lapras is also not a one-hit. It survives like with Seaking, but you can see that Seadra was doing more damage. Still, Lapras doesn't have very much. It just goes for Body Slam, but because of all of my badge boosts, I have such a high defense stat that it does pathetic damage. Okay, Hiker next, and then I have to face Agatha. Seadra's higher special stat is an advantage here because after badge boosts, I can do more to her Ghost-type Pokemon when compared with Seaking. Neither of these Pokemon has a damage-dealing move that can affect Ghosts and is also physical, so Seaking can't leverage its higher attack stat in this fight. While things were a little bit sketchy early on into this battle, I managed to pull through on Orange Health. Okay, before Lance, I have 4 rare candies left over, so I'm going to use 3 of them to go up to level 65 over 2 damage rounding thresholds. Because I've held on to Ice Beam to this point in the run, Lance is very simple. I can use it to 3-shot the Gyarados, which is much better than Seaking was doing with all the Surfs. Also, I get another freeze here. Nice. I'm getting a decent number of these in these 2 playthroughs. Dragonair 1 and Dragonair 2 are both one-shots. Aerodactyl is naturally outsped by Seadra, so I didn't even have to set up with agility. Beyond that, of course, Dragonite goes down to a single hit from Ice Beam, so I use my final rare candy up to level 66, and Seadra is also ready for the champion. Please look at the clock right now as the battle starts. It clicks over 55 minutes. If Seadra can't do this on its first attempt, it will get a worse time when compared with Seaking. It has roughly 50 seconds left by the time the Sand Slash goes down. Next is Alakazam. I have mimicked Earthquake for it, but I don't have enough damage because my physical attack is lower. The champion uses a full restore, further delaying Seadra, and then the Alakazam gets to strike back with Psybeam. Luckily, it doesn't confuse me. I get in one more Surf and Alakazam faints. Okay, time for the Executor. Of course, here Ice Beam is going to be the correct choice. I hit hoping for a freeze, but I don't get it. This plays the Leech Seed animation. By the way, animations get turned on automatically during the champion fight. There is no way for me to play around this. Well, technically I could just turn them off with my software, but I chose not to do that. So I'm wasting time now every turn having my health get sapped. I set up with agility here, badge boosting all of Seadra's stats. I wanted to one-shot the Executor with my next Ice Beam for sure. And I also wanted to guarantee that Earthquake was going to get the one hit against the Magneton because my lower attack stat is not making me confident against it. So will I be able to do it? And the answer is after 3 agilities, yes. Alright, Seadra is moving on to the Cloyster. I'm still at a lower time than Seaking. Surf needs to 2-hit here, I think at least. And it gets a critical hit right away, bringing the Cloyster down to orange health. Spike Cannon does not get a critical hit, so I'm going to get a second Surf in. This takes the Cloyster out, and I'm moving on to the champion's final Pokemon. With roughly 9 seconds to go, Flareon hits with Quick Attack, my Surf hits it, doing massive damage, and of course it faints. Seadra clocks in with a first playthrough time of 55 minutes and 53 seconds. That is 4 seconds slower when compared with Seaking. Although Seadra was more inconsistent with 4 resets and 0 blackouts, it finished the game at level 67 with a game time of 3 hours and 33 minutes. Here are the splits from the first playthrough. I just want to mention here, if you notice that there's no difference listed, it's because the Pokemon did the splits in a different order. If the difference has a light blue color, it is Seadra's advantage, and if the split has a dark blue color, then it is Seaking's advantage. In this case, Seadra was in a major lead at Brock. It lost some of this lead throughout the next section of the game, and slowly dwindled down until the Wrapping Lass, where it was only 3 seconds ahead. Beyond that, it started to fall behind, although it gained back some time by Giovanni, but only 16 seconds. Throughout the league, Seaking was ahead, but Seadra was able to claw back the advantage of the champion because it didn't have a reset there. Looking at the timeline for these 2 playthroughs, it's clear that these 2 routes are actually very different, but their times were incredibly similar. One graph that I don't always show off is the game time lead. So here is Seadra's game time lead over Seaking. At the beginning of the game, it has a major game time advantage, and this lead slowly gets eroded away until the Wrapping Lass, where it's just a small amount ahead. Then Seadra falls behind, the data gets kind of janky because everything is out of sync, and then finally it syncs back up with Seadra having a small game time lead at Giovanni. Throughout the rest of the game, it builds on this league until the champion. In some ways, game time is a good litmus test for the overall best time the Pokemon can get. If I'm getting a lower game time with Seadra, right now that suggests that it should be able to outperform Seaking in the follow-up playthroughs. But I always rank Pokemon Pokemon based on their real-time finishes because resets do count. Let's take a hypothetical example for instance. If a Pokemon had 10 resets at the champion and the other Pokemon got through the champion on its first attempt consistently, but the Pokemon that had 10 resets got a lower game time, I don't think it makes sense to rank that Pokemon above the other Pokemon. This is why I favor real time, although my obsession with this metric really does make me play a ridiculous number of playthroughs. After my first attempts were complete, I did my optimizations and then I came back to try both of these Pokemon again. And I played 6 more full follow-up attempts with each of the Pokemon. With Seadra I attempted 18 times and with Seaking I attempted 20 times. By the way, I always separate attempts and finishes. An attempt is just whenever I press the new game button at the beginning of the game, and a finish is whenever I defeat the champion. Now, like their initial attempts, I played these two in the same order, so Seadra's optimization happened first and then Seaking's happened after. In this video, I'm feeling like doing things chronologically, so let's go into Seadra's playthroughs first and see how I was able to optimize its results. Actually, one other thing before I get started with talking about Seadra, I also want to talk about a comment I got a little while ago asking me to show more of my failures during the optimization process, and I think this is really good feedback. So today, I'm going to show you some of the runs that did not go well when I was trying to optimize these Pokemon, and I hope that this approach gives you a little bit more context as to why I made the choices I did with each of them. If you enjoy this approach, please like the video and also let me know in the comments so that I see that feedback and implement it for future Versus videos. I came back to optimize Seadra 5 months after doing its first playthrough in February, so the second run I completed on July 15th. I didn't try to over-optimize this playthrough, instead just going in and seeing how things would go with a little bit more knowledge. It turns out Seadra still struggles with the early grass-type Pokemon in the game. While I do make it by the Wrapping Lass without problems, then inside the tunnel, I go up against the Status Condition Junior Trainer and she gives me a total of 2 resets. My next one is against another NPC, not a major battle, Agatha Jr. in Pokemon Tower. Seadra just doesn't have enough damage to knock out the ghosts in single hits, so it's always going to be exposed to this risk. In order to not be worried for Koga, I just ensured that I over-leveled for him, and this also makes Blaine and Giovanni very simple. I start running into problems with Seadra against the rival right before the league. Setting up with agility doesn't give me one-shots. To do so, I need to take time and risk confusion against the Cloyster, which can be annoying, or I risk damage against the Sandslash at the very beginning of the fight. If I'm not one-shotting, then I risk paralysis on the Magneton, and the Kadabra that follows survives my hits because I'm a special attacker, and so it's able to knock me out with powerful special moves. After 2 resets, I realized that I need to use 1 rare candy before this battle so that I can set up and then retain my badge boosts for the Kadabra and not lose them after the Magneton. By doing this, I'm able to defeat the rival and move on to the league. Strategically, the Elite Four is very straightforward for Seadra, but it does have a close call against Lorelei. I squeak through with red health. After that, I make it back to the champion, and here I tried playing with no agilities. This is a terrible idea. Then Magneton attacks me, I have low health, and I'm also poisoned. As a result, I go down to the Cloyster. It makes far more sense to just set up on the Executor as it tries to spam Leech Seed over and over again. This is because the AI doesn't know it's a status move. It thinks it's a grass-type move that's super effective against Seadra, so even once you have the status condition, it just keeps using it. This gives me free setup, enough damage to 2-hit the Cloyster and 1-hit the final Flareon. And in my second run, I get a time of 53 minutes and 1 second, with 6 resets. This number 6 also is apparently really important for Seadra. Maybe it likes this number, because in the next 2 playthroughs, I also get 6 resets. I'll mention the finish times for those runs in just 1 second. First, I want to jump into some footage right before Surge. As I'm using the bag right outside his gym, I'm going to teach my Seadra Rest this early on. The reason is I want to have a solution to all the grass types. In case they do a lot of damage with Absorb, paired with something like Sleep Powder, if I wake up, I want to be able to heal, continue the fight, and eventually win with no resets. Also, Surge Shoes next is completely awful if he just spams Thunderbolt a bunch. Then you are going to lose and take resets, a total of 2 in my 3rd playthrough. I take a single reset to the Wrapping Lass, a very close call against Agatha Jr., and a 4th reset inside Erica's gym, trying her at a lower level to hopefully make the mid-game just a little bit more smooth. This initially looks like it's a mistake and it's going to get rooted out later in my process, but I actually never did. I continue fighting Erica at this level throughout all of my remaining playthroughs. The reason is fairly simple. I have a 25% chance to one-shot the Tangela, a 42% chance to one-shot the Weepinbell, and a 59% chance to one-shot the final Gloom. If 2 of these Pokemon attack with a Grass-type move, Seadra will survive, so it only needs to one-shot 1 of them. And for me, that's good enough odds to not backtrack to Celadon City later in the game, saving a little bit of overworld time. All of these little things matter, and cutting some corners and having a slightly riskier Erica fight was a good trade-off for me. During this 3rd run with Seadra, I had a really frustrating loss during the rival battle in Silph because the Magneton paralyzes me with with Thundershock, which is a 10% chance. Because of the status condition, I get hit by another Thundershock, which is a critical hit, and so Kadabra gets the final shot in with Psybeam. I think we've got the sense now that after it clears the rival in Silph, Seadra is kind of off to the races. You could say that it is rapidly dashing towards the end of the game, and it does all the way until it gets bad luck against Agatha, where she inflicts sleep and then Dream Eats me, taking me down to low health. The Arbok then, of all Pokemon, survives my hit on a Sliver, uses Acid, gets a critical hit, and Seadra faints. Probably the most frustrating reset of this entire playthrough. Losing to Surge does not feel that bad. The Arbok is never supposed to knock you out. It is by far Agatha's worst Pokemon. Okay, so I beat the champion in 50 minutes and 12 seconds, with once again 6 resets. And the trend continues because it gets 6 resets in my 4th playthrough as well. This is the point where I really wanted to start dialing things in. After fighting Brock, I decided to go out onto Route 3 without healing, hopefully saving some time. I figured if I'm going to battle the Lass here, I'm going to walk back to Pewter City anyway, and I might as well take my heal then. Turns out Bubble is not good enough for this. I run out of PP during this battle, and that's a restart. In the next playthrough, I get stopped by youngster Ben, because yes, he's actually quite good in some of these playthroughs, especially when you only have Bubble. See, I told you earlier on in this video that sometimes he causes problems for Pokemon that have this move. Right now, Poliwag is wrapping its little tadpole tail around Seadra and trying to comfort it. I also tried not healing before Brock, because maybe defeating the junior trainer right away and then just battling Brock is enough since I have Bubble. But this is not a good choice. The Geodude does a lot of damage with Tackle, and then the Onix can knock me out even though I level up to level 9. Occasionally in Viridian Forest, I have attempts that just go sour when I fail to catch a Pidgey. Yes, I do restart the entire playthrough when this happens. The days of me accepting a Doduo and an optimized playthrough of a final stage Pokemon have definitely passed. One thing I should mention with Seadra, I wasn't feeling confident against Misty as soon as I arrive in Cerulean City, so I was trying to do Nugget Bridge first. This does lead to occasional complications against the Oddish Lass because I don't have Bubble Beam. Also, so we can see more of my failures, sometimes in Viridian Forest, on minimum battles, when you fight the bug catcher at the end of the forest, he can defeat you. This is if his Caterpie uses Tackle consistently throughout the battle, and I actually rocked back in my chair and laughed out loud when this fight happened. After 4 successful attempts with no intervening attempts, I felt like the game had cursed me. I am just stuck trying to get through the early game, not progressing. And this is typically how things play out behind the scenes with these versus videos. As more and more of the route becomes refined and streamlined, I have to take more and more small risks along the way. This means that it is less and less likely for me to get a full run completed. So now let's jump to my final Seadra run and see how all of this came together in the end. I did decide to do minimum battles until Pewter City, fighting the bug catcher at level 6. Bubble is a guaranteed 6 shot, and Tackle does between 12 and 17% damage per hit, 3 to 4 damage. Unless things go truly awfully here, I'm going to win. Inside Brock's gym, I fight the junior trainer to get extra experience. This levels Seadra up twice before Brock. The main reason to do this battle is just because I want fast experience, and I also want to speed tie Brock's Onix. If I can move first, then I could potentially save 1 or 2 turns, depending on if I crit or not. Within Cerulean City, I fell back on a strategy that I used with Starmie, and that is to fight the rival on Nugget Bridge for experience. Then I go north fighting the bug catcher, and after he's defeated, I need to heal. So I backtrack to the Pokemon Center, go into Misty's gym, fight the junior trainer, and then take on Misty. The problems I was having against the Oddish Lass that you've seen were just too frustrating for me, so I really wanted Bubble Beam to proceed with the run. My strategy for Misty is not to use Bide. With Seadra, it doesn't have enough HP. Instead, I'm going to spam Smokescreen, dropping Starmie's accuracy all the way to -6. After this, I can spam Water Gun and slowly knock it out. The only time it makes sense to use this number of Smokescreens is when you take this long to knock the opponent out. I'm of course running Rest for the mid-game, which you can see as I battle Surge. Now notably here, Thunderbolt doesn't always one-hit Seadra. It has a 27.8% chance to, so there's a chance I survive. I don't want to reset right away if he chooses it. Sometimes though, he does absolutely nothing and I beat him. So in my 6th playthrough, I got a time of 48 minutes and 5 seconds, and right now in my 7th playthrough, I am a minute ahead of that pace. This is where things slow down though. For the Wrapping Lass, I really want to get poisoned turn 1 so I can knock it out as well as the following Bellsprout, and then on the next Oddish I can use Rest to heal and knock out her final 2 Pokemon. If I get paralyzed right away, I just reset so that I waste as little time as possible. The context for this is that in Generation 1, if you use Rest, the debuff from paralysis on your speed stat is not removed. With Seadra's mid-game, I want to talk about how I made all of the trainers here much easier by reallocating my rare candies and my training. In my first run I finished the game at level 67, but I now know that I only need to finish the game at level 63. So that's a difference of 4 levels, and this means I can move my rare candies from the late game right before Lorelei earlier into the run to help out against the mid-game trainers. I grab the extra rare candy in the hideout, but I don't waste time picking up other items. Then on Cycling Road, I battle a total of 6 extra trainers. So this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy. At level 35, I have guaranteed 1 hits on the cool trainer inside of Erica's gym. And as I've gone through before, I like these odds against Erica, it's fine, and I want this experience now. Because then I can go to Koga's gym, battle the 2 tamers in addition to the mandatory trainers, which gets Seadra to level 39. I can now use 6 rare candies to bring it up to level 45 before battling Koga. Doing things this way, I don't have to backtrack to Saffron City later on, and that's going to save a little bit of overworld time. Plus my damage ranges against Koga are pretty good. 100% on the first Venonat, 89% on the second one, 55% on the third one, and then a 30% chance to 2-hit the Venomoth. But if we look at his damage ranges, he really isn't a threat unless his third Venonat gets off a successful sleep powder. With him defeated, I am ahead of my 6th playthrough by 52 seconds. With access to Surf outside of battle, I can take on Blaine now. This is going to make the rival in Silph much easier because I'll have a special boost. Blaine isn't really a threat for Seadra. I have a 2-hit on all of his Pokemon and a 65.7% chance to 1-hit the Rapidash. Now it's time for Silph, but since I've done a lot of optional training up until this point and I've used rare candies, I am not going to do much optional training here now. I fight the Rocket for the rare candy, also this scientist who has 5 Pokemon, all of which are 1-hits. After that, only the mandatory Arbok guy, and then I take on the rival. Level 47 helps my damage ranges here a lot. I 2-hit the Cloyster, I 2-hit the Magneton, and I have a chance of 1-hitting the Kadabra with Surf. 63.6%. You might think that Swift as a physical move would be better, but no, Surf has the better damage range. The Flareon is also a comfortable 1-hit. One thing I don't always show on this channel is how I figure out where I'm going to level up mid-battle. I do this with the router, so you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen there is a list of all the events. Right now I'm filtering these to only display fighting trainers as well as using rare candies. This is how I like to view my routes. I think it's the most concise way to make choices about who I'm battling and who I'm not. You can see here that all the major battles are highlighted in black. In the second column of the rival, it says number 1 Flareon. What this means is my Pokemon is going to level up before the first Flareon comes out. Of course, the rival only has 1 Flareon. We could take away the number 1, but it's like a programmatic thing. I'm sure it's more work than it's really worth. As you can see, when I battle Giovanni, I level up going into the Rhyhorn, and then for Sabrina that follows, I do not level up during the battle. This means now with Seadra, I can utilize the Agility and Swift strategy to take a free victory over her. Inside Giovanni's gym, once I defeat the Rhyhorn trainer, I level up, and this is the perfect level up because it now gives Seadra enough speed to move first against the Dugtrio. Giovanni's Persian is still faster, but it doesn't matter because it's really not a threat. It takes 3 turns to knock me out, even when getting crits with Slash. For the rival on Route 22, I set up with 3 agilities against the Cloyster after 1-hitting both the Sandslash and the Execute. I'm not really doing this for extra damage, I still have to 2-hit the Magneton, but if it uses Thunder Wave against me, I will still be faster and able to move first against both it and the following Kadabra, which is quite fast. And I need 2 shots to knock that thing out as well. The setup here also lets me take less damage, and I pull through with no resets. When the Flareon faints, I get enough experience to level up to 53, and I use 5 rare candies, bringing Seadra up to level 58. Here are the damage ranges against Lorelei when I set up with Agility 3 times and Amnesia 3 times. If you ever want to check this when looking at these graphics that I'm showing you, just look in the top center. You can see the number of player setup moves that I have used on my Pokemon to be seeing these damage ranges. Just know that this applies to the damage ranges against every Pokemon, so both the Dugong and the Cloyster look a lot better than they actually are. However, once I've fully set up with Amnesia, then I have a 2-hit against the Lapras, and I think this is much better, plus the safety of having the Amnesias really does help. Lance can potentially be problematic because I need to set up with 1 agility to ensure that I outspeed the Aerodactyl. However, once the first Pokemon goes down, barring a Generation 1 miss, the fight is free. Okay, so as is the case with most water types in Generation 1, the game is quite easy outside of some grass types in the early game, but then the champion shows up and his Magneton is such a nuisance. At level 61, without any agilities set up, I am going to 2-shot the Magneton using a Mimicked Earthquake. With 1 agility, my turns to KO does not change. With 2, it jumps up to 29.3%, and with 3, it jumps jumps all the way up to 82.9% chance. I'm going to provide another screenshot here so you can see my late game experience routing. I level up after Lorelei's final Pokemon, then on Agatha's Golbat, and on Lance's second Dragonair. For the champion, I level up going into the Executor, which is the perfect opportunity for me to set up with agility while it spams Leech Seed. Then I maintain my badge boosts for the Magneton, the Cloyster, and the Flareon, and level up after his final Pokemon. Using this strategy, I am able to just barely pull through with a win, having no resets on the champion. I had 4 hit points remaining when the Flareon faints. So in this video's final playthrough with Seadra, I was able to get a time of 43 minutes and 40 seconds, with 1 reset at level 63, with a game time of 2 hours and 52 minutes. This is 4 minutes and 25 seconds ahead of my 6th playthrough, and I was exceptionally happy with this time. So let's bring up the tier list and rank Seadra within it. I do just want to make a big shout out here to Weil, who has helped me all year to develop the software that allows us to make these graphics. This isn't something we put together in Photoshop, it is a piece of custom software that takes in all the data from my playthroughs and then displays the Pokemon in the tier list. We can also reshuffle all of these lists by just changing the thresholds very easily on the right hand side, and it also has the ability to filter out results based on the video's release dates. I'm hoping that going forward, this feature is going to help us not have any accidental spoilers creeping into the tier lists, because that has been known to happen in the past, and every time it does happen, I feel really bad after. Anyways, so Seadra, today with a time under 44 minutes, it earns itself a spot in the A tier. Its result of 43 minutes and 40 seconds is significantly behind Nidoqueen's result, which was 42 minutes and 53 seconds. And Seaking is just barely ahead of Haunter, which had a time of 43 minutes and 44 seconds. Just for a little bit of context, I think that Seadra is approaching its maximum possible speed if I want to be consistent. Of course, I could get really risky and push this time down much lower, but that's the case for most Pokemon ranked here in the tier list. For Haunter, on the other hand, I think its time can be significantly better than this if Hypnosis cooperates, but playing that kind of run and relying on that amount of luck does make me prefer Seadra between these two Pokemon. I want to also highlight results that Tentacruel got, 44 minutes and 11 seconds, so it's actually quite close to Seadra, even though it's in the next tier down. Poliwag, the first stage water type, was able to get a time of 45 minutes and 53 seconds, which is an absolutely outstanding result. It's currently the top ranked first stage Pokemon in the entire tier list. Okay, so like Dalmatians, there are 101 Pokemon ranked in this tier list. Actually, there are no Dalmatians ranked in this tier list, so that doesn't make any sense. Anyways, there are 101 Pokemon ranked. I have 50 left to go, so let's complete one of them right now and see how Seaking was able to do in its follow-up attempts. Before I had time to sit down and optimize Seaking myself, I was lucky enough to receive a community submission. It had a route file as well as a finished screenshot with a good time for this fish, and that made me very inspired to play it. So the route that I started playing from my second attempt with Seaking onwards was one submitted by Zealous Pawn. I ended up making some tweaks, and I'm going to show you why I came to those conclusions. Anyways, thank you Zealous Pawn for submitting the route file, I really appreciate it. And if you want to submit your own route files, replays, etc. for these playthroughs, check out the Discord link in the description. Okay, so let's quickly go through my second playthrough and talk about the madness that is this run. First of all, Seaking needs to fight Brock, but it doesn't need a high level like I had last time. Instead, it only needs to start at level 10. To get this, I can battle all the bug catchers in Viridian Forest, bringing me up to level 9, and then the junior trainer inside of Brock's gym, which pushes me over level 10. These are the damage ranges against Brock at level 10. Seaking is roughly going to 12 to 15 hit the Geodude, and then 32 hit the Onix, which is obviously just not good. Although, at level 11, Seaking does speed tie the Onix, which is a small advantage. At level 9, I have a 29 hit against the Geodude, and still a 32 hit against the Onix, but I don't have a speed tie, so it's going to be able to hit me with Bide. Hopefully you can see why these damage ranges are much more favorable for me at level 10, and this fight still requires a lot of luck. I'm going to be relying on the Supersonic strategy in combination with Tail Whip and then eventually Peck to knock out his Pokemon. I'm just going to say it now, but throughout my time playing with Seaking, I had so many restarts just because of Brock. I'm not saving before this battle because I only waste roughly 4 minutes if I do lose here, and I know the fight is going badly if I'm under half health by the time the Geodude goes down. So since I really committed to the level 10 strategy, which is definitely definitely more risky, let's talk about what happens at level 13 for Seaking. It converts the Geodude to a much more favorable range. I'm going to take 7 to 10 turns to knock it out without using any tail whips. But the Onix still takes the same number of turns, although Seaking does consistently outspeed it. The level that really makes a difference is 12 because it lowers the Geodude's damage from 5 to 6 per turn to 4 to 5 per turn. But training in the early game in order to get this level requires wild battles, but if Seaking can do it at level 10, I don't see why it should sacrifice the extra time. The only reason would be if you only get a single attempt, then maybe leveling up makes sense to make this a little bit more consistent and minimize resets. But you all know that I love playing Pokemon Yellow, so I'm totally fine just repeating Brock over and over again until I finally win. En route 3, I battle the Bugcatcher for extra experience instead of the Lass. Then inside of Mount Moon I battle 3 trainers, the Bugcatcher, the Lass, and the Hiker. Inside the Cerulean City Gym I battle the Swimmer and the Junior Trainer to level up to 19. By doing this, I have a speed tie with Misty's Staryu, making the battle here slightly more consistent. Seaking's high HP stat is a benefit here because I can use Bide, and with that I earn the TM for Bubble Beam and speed through the next routes of the game. Well, until I get to Lieutenant Surge, and this is where he takes his revenge on Seaking. There were so many playthroughs here where I was getting a fantastic time in comparison with my previous split, and then Surge would just come in and slap me down. This playthrough is not the worst, I only get a single reset, but in a future one where I was getting an amazing personal best, he beat me a total of 4 times in a row, and the resets against Surge are so fast that I was still getting a personal best after those defeats. In the mid-game, this is where Seaking starts to gain some time over Seadra, because it's only going to battle 1 trainer on Cycling Road, bringing it up to level 33. Then inside of Silph, Zealous Pawn fights 4 trainers, the Machoke guy and these 3 people, each which have 4 Pokemon. This brings Seaking up to level 36. I can now use 7 rare candies to boost it to level 43 before fighting the rival. A question here might be, why not fight Koga? Why not do things in the same order that I did previously with Seadra? Well, the answer is Seaking has lower special, so fighting both Erica and Koga now is a little bit more risky, whereas fighting the rival ends up being fine, and then I can access the training in Silph, which all comes along the normal path that the player has to walk for one of these solo challenges. By the time I defeat Giovanni, I am level 45, and then I can dig out of Silph, heading back to Celadon City where my waypoint is set, and battle Erica. At this esteemed level, her Pokemon are simple one-hits, and with her defeated, I then go to Koga's gym. There are 2 reasons to do it in this order. Number 1, I can get the Warden rare candy as soon as I beat Koga and never have to backtrack to Fuchsia City to pick it up, and number 2, I have better damage ranges with more experience. I'm starting this fight at level 47, giving Seaking an 88.9% chance to one-hit the first Venonat, 51.1% chance on the second one, and only a 13.3% chance on the third one. So for it, I'm going to use Ice Beam first and hope for a freeze. It's nice to have the extra upside, and after that, once I wake up from sleep, then I can knock it out and 3-hit the Venomoth. Unless I get a little bit lucky, it has a 24.8% chance to 2-hit. Okay, are you ready for it? I've been trying to set this up throughout the entire video. Once I defeat Koga's Venomoth, Seaking levels up to 48, and here it has a chance to learn Horn Drill. And yeah, everyone should rejoice because I'm gonna teach this move to it. I never really thought that I would end up using these moves in a serious way for an extended period of time during a playthrough, but today I'm going to. It's gonna take a little bit of justification though, because 30% accuracy is honestly trash. First of all, Blaine is next. Now I'm gonna use 3 rare candies before him, and this seems like a weird choice. However, if I delayed using the rare candies, which I did try to do, what ends up happening is I finish the game at the exact same level and it doesn't change damage ranges. So I might as well use them now, have a little bit more speed, and move first against his Rapidash, as well as Sabrina's Kadabra, and she's coming up next. There's a tiny bit of risk here. I 1-hit the Abra, but I 2-hit the Kadabra and the Alakazam. The problem is if her ace sets up Reflect and then spams Recover, it could start using Psychic and deal a lot of damage to Seaking. But Sabrina is really bad in Yellow version, so this doesn't happen. After that, I crush Giovanni and get access to Agility, which I put in the place of Horn Attack. Okay, let's start talking about Horn Drill. I've been really excited about this. When I first sat down and saw Zealous Pawn's screenshot, and I saw Horn Drill as part of the final set, I honestly became so fearful of Seaking and put off playing its final playthroughs for like a week or 2. That said, when I came back and used this move, I really enjoyed it. It was so refreshing to use a move that is this fundamentally inconsistent. The thing is though, while the move itself is inconsistent in application, in practice it actually makes Seaking more consistent. So here's how that works. Against the rival, I was trying to set up against the Sand Slash, which I think is a mistake. I should be trying to set up against the Cloister instead while it spams Supersonic. However, if I do make a mistake like this, it's not the end of the world, because I can always chance getting the win by horn drilling both the Cloister and the Magneton. And in this case, I hit the Cloister, knocking it out in one hit, and then I also hit the Magneton, knocking it out in one hit. I move on to the Kadabra, and then it goes for Psybeam. I figured this was the end, but it Gen 1 misses, and that gives Seaking the win. Okay, so 2 horn drill hits into a Gen 1 miss. These odds are obviously not good for Seaking. It's regularly not going to be able to do that. But I do want to mention, if I didn't have horn drill, there wouldn't have been a chance for me to survive the Psybeam because of a Gen 1 miss. The Magneton would have gotten an additional hit in, likely paralyzing or damaging me, which would have knocked Seaking out. So the fact that I was using horn drill allowed me to get to the Kadabra, and that allowed it to use a move and get a Gen 1 miss. So put simply, horn drill adds consistency, because if the battle is going badly or you've made a player error, you can still luck through certain scenarios. It essentially functions on one hand as a last resort measure and allowed me to pull through that battle with no resets. Before Lorelei, I teach Mimic in the place of Ice Beam, and now let's talk about the second way that horn drill is useful. Lorelei's Pokemon take a long time to knock out with Surf, even after I've badge boosted with Agility and then later Amnesia. And for the Dugong, the Cloister, and the Slowbro, I am not really able to set up with Amnesia and then one-shot, because the Slowbro is going to set up with its own Amnesias and I'm going to do little damage to it. But with horn drill, I can just one-shot all 3 of these Pokemon. I really want to emphasize to everyone just how many turns this saves in battle, or has the potential to save in battle, because I can also just run out of horn drill PP, and that's really frustrating. I end up taking a reset here, which is not the end of the world. I had forgotten a rare candy before this fight, which I'm going to use now. Improving my damage ranges here isn't really important, but this rare candy used here ensures that Seaking arrives at the end of the game with the correct level. Okay, so after only 1 reset to Lorelei, I'm able to defeat her on my second attempt. Against Agatha, I get an annoying reset, and then against Lance, I started to realize the flaw in this strategy. My current moveset is Surf, which I can't delete, Horn Drill, which is going to solve 2 Pokemon on the Champions team, Mimic, which helps me solve the Magneton on his team with Earthquake, and I need Agility to ensure that Earthquake has enough damage. That means this has to be my set against Lance. And that leaves Seaking with very few choices against the Gyarados and the first Dragonair. Both of these Pokemon are scary for it. The Gyarados can hit with Leer, lowering my defense, and then Hyper Beam doing massive damage. The Dragonair can use Thunder Wave to paralyze me, ruining my speed, and Thunderbolt to do a lot of damage. While I only lose once here, there is potential for me to lose many more times. I'm going to show you that footage in just 1 second. First of all, let's talk about the champion. Here, 2 turns of setup to ensure Earthquake has enough damage, Mimic it, and then Surf the Sandslash, Earthquake the Alakazam, Horn Drill the Executor, Earthquake the Magneton, Horn Drill the Cloister if you're on low health, and then Earthquake the Flareon, and this is very important because Surf only has an 82% chance to knock it out, whereas the ground type move is guaranteed. Utilizing this strategy in my second playthrough, I was able to get a time of 47 minutes and 34 seconds, with 6 resets, 0 blackouts at level 61 with a game time of 2 hours and 56 minutes. I want to quickly pop back to the tier list with Seadra's ranked time, 43 minutes and 40 seconds. This seems like a very big difference from the time that Seaking just got, but look at the game time, 2 hours and 52 minutes. Seaking's game time was only 4 minutes behind Seadra's. My thought process was, if Seaking can do a playthrough with 1 or 2 resets, I think it might get a better time or a similar time to Seadra. These two play very differently, but they end up having very similar results. Seadra is better against Brock, Seaking is better in the game up until the arrival in Celadon City, and really it feels better throughout the remaining portion of the mid-game, but Seadra feels a little bit stronger in the late game because it's not relying on Horn Drill for key opponents. Okay, next we're going to jump into my 4th playthrough. In my 3rd playthrough, I was able to get a time that is slightly faster by only 6 seconds, 47 minutes and 28 seconds, but I had more resets this time. The reason was Lance started to be a problem, but he became a major problem by my 4th playthrough. I arrived at him with 1 reset under 42 minutes on the clock, so Seaking potentially could get like a 43 or 44 minute time at its current pace. But then Horn Drill missed so much on the Gyarados, and I have to use it against the Dragonair, or I have to use Surf 3 times. And the Dragonair crits me and then paralyzes me, which is just awful. I was so frustrated. And this frustration just got worse and worse and worse as the resets stacked up. The reality of the situation is that relying on Horndrill against a Gyarados and a Dragonair, or relying on Horndrill and Surf for a Gyarados and a Dragonair and then mimicking Ice Beam from the third Pokemon on Lance's team is just not a very reliable strategy. Because of this, I get a total of 18 resets in this playthrough, and I finished the game with a time of 49 minutes and 43 seconds. So still a decent time, but it's 2 minutes and 15 seconds slower than my personal best. This made me fundamentally reevaluate how I approach the late game. I can use Horndrill for a faster Lorelei and then teach Blizzard in its place for Lance. I can also mimic Hyper Beam from the Gyarados so that after one Blizzard, I can just use the normal move to knock it out and not have to recharge. I then have Blizzard for the rest of his Pokemon, and with 90% accuracy in Generation 1, this move is okay, it's fairly consistent. Still, with this strategy, I can have resets against Lance, but it's also much worse against the champion. I only have an 81.7% chance to knock out the Executor in 2 hits. And yes, that is after 2 agilities and the badge boosts. But that's not the real problem, it comes when I get to the Cloyster. Now, I had thought about teaching Rest, but then what move do I give up? I need Agility and Earthquake like I've said before for the Magneton. I kind of need Blizzard for the Executor, but if I had to drop something, it would have to be Blizzard, and then I would need to knock out the Executor using Surf and Rest, so the fight would overall take longer. And I've also been skipping the trainer that I need to battle to get Rest on the SSN and that entire section of walking. I didn't want to resign myself to suboptimal play with Seaking, so I decided to find a different strategy. But in this 5th attempt, I get a time of 46 minutes and 6 seconds, with 9 resets at level 61. This is a game time of 2 hours and 48 minutes. So if you think that game time is the most important metric, this is beating Seadra's final performance. I tried this strategy one more time hoping for better luck at the champion, but it didn't happen. So I came up with a new strategy for the late game. Teach Blizzard for Lance, then I have a move that can hit all of his dragons for super effective damage. After he's defeated, I use the Horndrill TM to teach Horndrill in the place of Blizzard, and then I use this move for the champion's Executor and Cloyster. By doing this, I have a more consistent Lance and a more consistent champion, and I am able to skip the Rest TM on the SSN. So here's the Lance fight from my 7th and final playthrough. I really want to emphasize how well this run was going. My only reset was a very fast one against Lieutenant Surge in the early game. Utilizing Agility on turn 1, Mimic for Hyper Beam on turn 2, Blizzard on turn 3 for damage against the Gyarados, and then Hyper Beam to knock it out, I get by his first Pokemon and sweep through his team, taking a first attempt victory. Then I teach Horndrill and go into the battle against the champion. Please, everyone look at the time. 42 minutes and 36 seconds. If Seaking is able to beat the champion in this fight, it will get a better time when compared with Seadra. I have to use Agility twice. Sandslash takes me down to low red health, which sometimes happens. Level 60 is great because I can survive its damage. The problem now is, if I have taken this much, then I have to use Horndrill against the Cloyster. If I had higher health, which can also happen, like the Sandslash can just poison sting me 3 times in a row and essentially do nothing. If that happens, then I can Surf the Cloyster and have a little bit more consistency. But in this case, it doesn't work out for me, and eventually the Cloyster stops Seaking. If the Sandslash continues attacking every turn with Slash and Earthquake, you're usually gonna faint, and that happens in my 2nd battle. In the 3rd battle, Cloyster stops me with Spike Cannon, and now Seaking is slower than Seadra. I get another reset to Cloyster, and each one of these is frustrating because it's so far into the battle. So with 6 resets, I finally defeat the champion, which is not very nice. This result ends up being 33 seconds slower than my 5th playthrough. Okay, so today we can crown the victor. It is Seadra. It is in fact the King of the Sea. But that comes with one major caveat, because I think if you play these runs over and over again and always take the best possible times, if you allow Seaking to get risky, it will eventually outperform Seadra. Here are the run summaries for my final 2 routes, just in case you want to play something similar yourself and give these 2 Pokemon a try. If you want something that's really fun and sort of silly with Horndrill, try out Seaking, it's great. If you want something that's much more straightforward and consistent, I say go for Seadra. That said, consistency is very important for my tier list, so using a move like Horndrill is not going to get as good results as Seadra, and I think that is fair. Today, with its best time, 46 minutes and 6 seconds, Seaking earns itself a placement in the B tier. This ends up being just behind Poliwag, which it's a little bit annoying. Poliwag's game time is higher than Seaking's. Once again, this thing's inconsistent. It has the potential to be very good, but it just relies on a lot of luck. And for that reason today, its results aren't that brilliant, and it's stuck in the B tier. Thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon and through YouTube memberships. You really do make these these videos possible. Okay, that's it for this video, but there's a big thing to announce now. Starting on October 1st, we are going to be doing a bunch of Halloween-themed runs, and I think they're going to be really special. There's a lot of yellow content, there is a lot of crystal content, and a lot of fire red content, with some platinum content and a little bit of emerald, but there's also a big surprise for those games coming, so stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, you are incredible. I will see you in my next video. Wait, I forgot to record voiceover for the Oak battles, so let's do those now. Seaking arrives at this fight in not a very good state. It's level 61, which is pretty low to face Oak. As you can see, his Tauros is level 66. Also, my moveset is just trash. Surf, Mimic, Agility, and Horn Drill. I really don't want Horn Drill for this battle. I tried and set up Agility against the Tauros, but then Surf is still not one-hitting. Executor comes out next, puts me to sleep, and then barrages Seaking into oblivion. I had a bunch of resets trying this one. I attempted different strategies, sometimes utilizing Horn Drill, but eventually I found out that Hypnosis mimicked from the Executor is just the most consistent play. Then I can put the Venusaur to sleep and use Horn Drill on it with decent consistency. After that is Gyarados, and I'm also going to put it to sleep. In this case, I ran out of Horn Drill PP, so I have to knock it out with Surf, which takes a long time, but eventually Seaking gets the job done. Seadra, on the other hand, is in a much better position. Surf, Mimic, Agility, and Ice Beam. Ice Beam is just so much more useful, especially against the Venusaur. Maybe I should have faced the Blastoise team because it might have been a little bit more challenging, but thematically it seems more fitting to face the Grass-type starter. In this case, I got badge boosted by the Tauros 3 times, and I also set up Agility 3 times, so I one-shot the Venusaur with Ice Beam, and then I level up, losing my boosts for the Gyarados. I was so afraid of getting hit by a Hyper Beam here, but the Gyarados goes for Leer, further lowering my defense, and then my second Ice Beam freezes. So that's that, and now I'm actually done.